Let's be real. Life almost seems to feel like one big balancing act between work, school, kids, families, partners, relationships, businesses, finances, and health. The older we get, the more we need to manage. I personally don't think things will always be 100% in balance, but I do believe women can achieve the productivity results they want without feeling like something has to give. That's why I'm so excited to talk with nonprofit CEO and CGS client Tiffany Tate today about pursuing top tier productivity. Let me stress that high level productivity isn't about being perfect. It's about making it all work for your world. If you struggle with the balancing act of all areas of life, you don't want to miss this conversation. Hey there, I'm Rhea Reeves, and over a decade ago, I turned my life around through budgeting. I went from being an overspender deep in credit card debt to being the founder and full-time money coach of City Girl Savings. Now, I help women work towards their dream life and tap into their financial power one budget at a time. I fully believe you can live a life you love with a budget, and I'm living proof. The weekly City Girl Savings podcast focuses on the intersection of money and the City Girl lifestyle. Join me every week along with some special guests as I share my experiences, advice, and guidance on navigating life and money as an experience-loving millennial. So Tiffany is the CEO of a Dallas-based nonprofit called The Family Place, which serves as one of the largest family violence service providers in Texas. Tiffany and I started working together in 2017. Not only has she tripled her salary and worked her way up in that time, but she's also become a great friend of mine outside of our work together. One of our traditions is attending annual Dallas Cowboys games together. Tiffany is a mom of 3. She owns multiple properties and recently became the dog mom to an adorable Shih Tzu puppy named Nino. Hi, Tiffany. Welcome to the podcast. I am so excited for this conversation, not just because we're friends, but because I feel like whether it's been pretty or not, you have excelled at productivity since I've known you in your career and in your finances. So I was hoping we could kick it off with you sharing just a little bit about your background. Have you always been a go-getter and a hard worker?
Well, first, thank you for having me. It's kind of surreal to be talking to you in this way because we're friends. And so it's just kind of surreal to be talking to you and having this experience. So I'm so grateful for you having me. So have I always been a go-getter and a hard worker? I think I've always been a hard worker. I think really my life has led me to be a go-getter. And I think like as is true with any kind of type A personality, as it's described, like we look at things as like to be accomplished as opposed to like finished, right? And so I'm always just looking for like where I need to go next, where I need to go next, where I need to go next. And I don't know that it's like thought about like, am I a go-getter? But really just, I want to just get things off the checklist. And so that's been my whole life.
Yeah, I think also being a type A personality, I can resonate with that a lot. And I think it's interesting that you say go-getter and hard worker. I have a similar sentiment. I've always been a hard worker, but sometimes I struggle with working harder and not smarter, right? Like I want to do things where I'm working as smartly as possible, so I'm not always working as hard as possible.
Yes, I agree with that.
So we're definitely going to talk more about your career progression in this episode, but I had mentioned in the intro that we've known each other since 2017 when we first started working together. So I was hoping we can talk a little bit about that. If you can remember that long ago, do you know what it was that made you want to take the leap and start working with me as your money coach back then? And how would you describe your work ethic back then? Would you say it was still the same? And yeah, I'd love to just have that conversation really quick.
Yeah. So in 2017, I was in the middle of a separation from a marriage that I eventually stayed in for 10 years, but should have stopped at that time. I reached out to you in 2017. However, I was like trying to figure out like, what am I supposed to do with money? Like, how is this supposed to work? Because I was not living paycheck to paycheck. I was living under that, right? Just like moving money around to try to figure out how to pay things because I really was the sole provider in my household. And so I was walking actually in a TJ Maxx, I'll never forget, and I should not have been shopping at the time. And I was like, I had reached out to several coaches and you were the first person that called me back. And I'm literally talking to you in TJ Maxx. And that's how we started working together. The reason that we continued working together was because after our very first session, you did my entire budget and you were like, okay, you have $50 spending money. And I was like, I have what? Like, no, like you could not have done it right. There is no way I have spending money. And I did, and I paid all my bills, and that's how it started.
I remember that. I remember you were so shocked to see that you actually had money left over after everything was all said and done. And we were allocating money towards some of your goals, like paying off debt and stuff back then too. So I remember that shock you had. And yeah, it was a game changer.
It was. I just could not believe it. And you were just so easy to work with, but also it was just simple. You were like, move this here and move that there and pay this and pay that. And I was like, what? Like, okay, I'm going to do it. And so we have been working together off and on since then.
We will definitely come back to money, but transitioning the conversation a little bit, you have navigated death, divorce, getting kids out of the house and into college, becoming a CEO, and owning a second home. What would you say your secret, or even if it's not a secret, just your tips are for managing your time and just staying productive across all areas of your life?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because, as you know, I would have answered that differently 2 years ago from my divorce than I would now. I think now my secret to that is really just being in tune with myself as a human being. I think in the past in my life, what has happened was I was always tied to the needs of other people, regardless of what that was, whether it was my partner at the time or my spouse or my husband. It's kind of like I always tell people, when you're born, you're somebody's daughter, right? And then you get married, you're somebody's spouse, and then you have children and you're somebody's parent, right? And so now my children are all grown out of the house. I'm out of a very unhealthy relationship. And so now my focus is really on me, like I belong to me. And so I would say that that's really how I guide myself in the advice that I would give anybody when trying to figure out like how to navigate their life when there's multiple things going on. You know, the death, the divorce, all those things, I would have handled them much differently. Now I survived them, right? And did what I needed to do, but I would have handled them much differently now that I'm more in tune with myself.
Yeah. So do you think you would have just maybe put yourself first more in those scenarios, or as you were going through those things, would you have worried about like how you were feeling and what your needs were more than you did?
I think so. You know, I'm going to overshare a little bit. So my situation in my marriage was definitely one of narcissistic abuse. And so when you're involved with a narcissist, it is not possible for you to think about yourself or anyone else, right? Because all of your energy is spent on regulating the mood of that person, right? And so when I say focus on myself now, I still get triggered and feel like that's selfish, but it's not, right? So it's focusing on what I need to do to make my experience in this earth better for me and for the people around me.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I think a lot of people are in situations like that, or where they maybe have their own insecurities and they're people pleasing, right? They want to make the people around them happy, even if it means suppressing their own feelings. And I think your advice of just being in tune with yourself and your needs is really important, especially for women.
Yeah, absolutely. For women. Yeah, we're just not oriented that way. Like we're not like, you know, women are the ones that carry the weight of things on their back. And so we're always told, like, you got to keep moving and you got to keep going and you got to take care of the household and the spouse and the children and the job and all of these things. And it's like, who takes care of us? Right. So we start that by learning to take care of ourselves.
Oh, that's so powerful. Well, clearly you did something right because you have grown in your career. I think when I first met you, you were director at the nonprofit where you work, and you grew to interim CEO and now actual CEO. So I would love to hear if you have any tips on like how you progressed through that channel. And well, let me just stop there because I have some additional questions first, but I think that's a big one.
Yeah. You know, when you think about like how I've grown financially and the things I'm able to do, and you know, how people traditionally set goals to do things like that, like mine was not driven by finances. It wasn't driven by, I want to achieve this amount of money. It really was driven by how I wanted to see victims of domestic violence treated. And
Wow.
so throughout the journey in my career, it was like, if I get to this level, I can impact this amount of change. If I get to the next level, I can impact a greater amount of change. And that's really how it started, right? Like, how can I be the most or the greatest change agent in this situation based on the level that I've achieved, right? So really, I just started thinking through, like, if I want to make a decision in this realm, what does my role need to be?
Mm.
Right? Not what my title needs to be, but what does my role need to be? And then I just kind of progressed through that. Like, I was blessed to just have opportunities to continue to shift and move through the organization to the role I'm in now.
Wow. Okay. And did you know that this was what you always wanted to do? Like, did you always want to be in this nonprofit space and specifically helping domestic violence victims?
No. So, interesting point. When I was a child, I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. I met a Black man who was a neurosurgeon when I was in elementary school, and I was just floored by him, and I wanted to do that. And I don't even think I knew what it meant. And so then I progressed through life. I go to college, and then I apply to law school, and I got a full scholarship to law school. And in my law school orientation, sat next to a girl who worked for, at the time, Child Protective Services. And I had never heard of Child Protective Services before in my life. And she goes, "Why don't you come visit my office?" And I go, "Okay." So I go to her office. That day, it was probably a Monday. I apply on a Tuesday. I was hired on a Friday. And then I've been in social services ever since.
Wow.
That's how I got to this route. Yeah.
That's how you know it was meant to be because it just happened so easily or so smoothly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Well, now that you are CEO, can you walk us through like a typical day in your life? I mean, what routines or habits have helped you stay as productive as possible, especially with such an intense job?
Yeah. You know this about me. So I am not a routine person. Let me say it this way. What I've learned about myself is to really evaluate what works best for me. And so there's a whole ideology or theme about routines that does not work for me personally because I am guilt oriented. And
Mm.
so if you have a routine and you're a guilt oriented person, the first day you miss a step in the routine, you feel guilty. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh God, I can't believe I missed it. And then it's like going through all these things. So really what I do every morning as I wake up and I listen to like what my body and my brain is telling me. And sometimes that is, you have this meeting on your calendar and it's like, I'm not connected for that meeting today. So I might call someone at my office who supports me and say, "Hey, we need to move this meeting around because I'm not in that brain space today." Or sometimes it's just I wake up and I'm like, I don't want to go to work. Or I wake up and I'm like at 5 because I can't sleep. And I'm like, I want to go to the office and work. Right. So my routine is really to just connect with myself first, figure out what that needs to look like for me that day. And that's how I move forward.
Wow. Okay. Do you like tune in with yourself throughout the day, or does the day kind of get ahead of you for, let's say, like health or your diet? I mean, do you realize, oh my gosh, it's 4 o'clock and I haven't eaten? Or are you in tune with yourself throughout the day to say, oh, actually, I'm hungry or I'm tired. I need a coffee. I need something to eat?
All day long. I'm in tune with myself all day long. I'm typically an 11 o'clock eater, and that's just how it happens, right? And so it's so funny. My team will be like, if we have a meeting at 11:30 and I haven't eaten, they'll be like, "She hasn't eaten. She has not eaten. Let's get some food," right? But yeah, I'm in tune with myself. I do touch bases all day long. One of the things that really helps for me is when I feel overwhelmed or stressed, I get out a sheet of paper and I make a list of my stressors. And for some reason, just putting them on a sheet of paper really takes away a lot of the stress that's attached to them. I think because I see it and I'm like, oh God, this isn't that overwhelming, right? So like multiple times a day, I may do that. And then I may not do it for a week, but that's kind of one of the ways that I kind of help myself touch base with myself during the day.
That's so helpful. I think for me, when I have like an anxious thought that won't go away, I like to write it out and just kind of like write about what I'm feeling. But I feel like the more we manage as women, we always have stressors, right? And I love this suggestion to write it down, like get it out of your head and onto paper and just
Yes.
see how it makes you feel. It sounds like it's impactful.
It is. It's impactful. And so going back to kind of routines, right? When the whole thing about journaling was coming out, and this just happened to me like a week ago. It was so profound, but I was like, okay, you have to journal every day at this time and you have to do these things. And so the day that I slept late or the day I didn't have my favorite pen or the day I left the journal at work because I was running late journal at work, my whole day was thrown off because I was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I was talking to my mentor, I think it was just last week, and she goes, you journal when you feel like journaling or when you're moved to journal. Like, don't make yourself journal. Like, that doesn't make the experience what it needs to be. And so just that little bit of like shift in my brain, right, really lets me release and think about like how that practice can be most efficient for me. And that's really how I manage most of my life.
I love that. And can I ask, Tiffany, I mean, because you had explained that it hadn't always been this way, but was there like a sudden shift that made you realize, oh my gosh, I need to put the focus on me? Like, how did you get to this place where now you're very much in tune with yourself?
I think I just got exhausted. Like, I literally just got exhausted, of like always being responsible for everything. And I mean, the scope of what that means, but like you just get exhausted. It's like I got to a point where I felt like my brain was like going to shut down if I didn't do something different. Right. But that's years and years and years of the same kind of pattern, just constant depression. I had been depressed for years, had just been anxious for years, just all of those things. And I got to where I hated to wake up in the morning or else I hated to come home. And so that was just a shift for me to say, hey, you got to do something different. And also, I'm a person of faith. And so I had a conversation one day with someone who said, God doesn't intend for your life to be miserable. Like, he doesn't intend for that. And so when I heard that, I was like, oh, gosh, like, what does that mean? And I started thinking about it more. And it's like, no, he doesn't intend this for me. So that means if I make a different choice, I'll get more of what I'm supposed to have. And it just was like a light bulb.
Wow.
It was hard. It was not easy, but it was like a light bulb.
Wow. Did you have to constantly remind yourself to check in with yourself, like in the early stages of you, like really becoming in tune with yourself and like focusing on what you needed? Did you have to constantly tell yourself, hey, wait, take a step back. You're about to people please, or you're about to do something you don't want to do. Like, take a beat. How do you feel? Did you have to do that a lot in the beginning?
Well, I'm only doing that now, 2 years later.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is because when you are that type of personality, I'm trying not to get too clinical because that's the work I do. But when you're that type of personality, what happens is when you remove that obsessive focus from one thing, you move it to another thing. Mm-hmm. So whether that's a person, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's work. So what I found myself doing was then engaging in friendships that I thought like had to be everything for me, that I had to monitor and maintain and do all those kinds of things. And so as I progressed over this 2-year period, that real focus on me is new. Like, that's really, really new for me. Yeah. I think what I did first was, of course, just the jumping to the other thing, right? The other fix. Yeah. And so it's new. I'm going to say maybe 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good for you. Better late than never, right?
Yeah.
That's huge. So I think we've kind of touched on this, but I want to go a little bit deeper. With so many responsibilities that you have at work and in life, how do you decide what takes a priority on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis? And are there any kind of outside resources like apps or assistants or just other support that you leverage that make a big difference for you?
How I prioritize is really what is most important to me in that time frame. And that's just to be really transparent. And I want to explain it so it doesn't sound horrible. But sometimes it's a priority to me that this one client in the shelter gets a stroller because I saw her outside walking with her children and she needed a stroller, right? Mm-hmm. Other days, it's important to me that I bring in $20,000 in that day for the agency. Other days, it's important to me that I rest, right? Mm-hmm. So I really prioritize based on what's at the top of that list we kind of described. If I've drawn out the list of stressors, what is the thing that I can take off of this list to make my brain a little less foggy, right? That's really how I prioritize myself. You know me, I do not well with apps. We've gone through Asana, we've gone through every single one you've tried to help me with, and it doesn't work. Also, just giving myself grace to just kind of be who I am, right? Mm-hmm. I'm the person who has the sticky note all over the place. I have sheets of paper everywhere telling me things to do, right? And it seems chaotic, but it's what works for me. I remembered that I wrote that grocery list on that sheet of paper and it fell into the front seat of my car and I go and get it and that's where it is. And so I just give myself grace for all of the kind of seemingly chaotic ways I navigate through life because that makes it easier for me. One of my employees now has the leadership team trying to go through Asana and I'm trying, like I put some stuff in there and that kind of thing because I think it's good for the team, but like, I don't know.
You guys use it, enjoy it. I'll be over here with my sticky notes. You
Yes.
know, I'm so glad you shared that though, because I think there's so much information online that makes you feel like you have to do things a certain way. And it doesn't have to be that way, right? You just have to find what works for you. And if you found it and it works, like that's what you do. It doesn't have to match what anyone else does.
Absolutely. Like all of the different trends and things, I cannot do it. I have also, you and I talked about this a while ago, but minimized my social media contact as much as possible. And I've had to do it more so because of my role. I have to like post things. But like, if you look at how people purport that they're living their lives on social media, like you will always feel like you're failing at something, always, right? And so I just limit that. I limit news. I limit anything that can get in my brain and take up space away from happiness.
Yeah, that's something that I do as well. I've never been one to just kind of carelessly scroll or just scroll to see what other people are doing and then let it fester in my mind and compare to my situation. I just avoid it altogether. I do what I need to do from a work perspective or to, actually engage with my friends and family. But outside of that, I really try to limit the use because you're right. It can be a dangerous game, especially if you have your own insecurities that haven't really been addressed or worked through.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. So, a question I have for you, because you mentioned that like this kind of journey of putting yourself first is relatively new, but I think you have shown that while that is a new process for you, you've clearly grown in your career. And so, would you say that you're good about compartmentalizing or like not bringing personal stuff into work? Or how did you power through when things were tough and you weren't really focused on yourself first?
So prior 2 years ago, honestly, I did compartmentalize, but I've since learned that that's not the way to do it, right? So let me go back and talk about that. If I would have allowed what I was going through in my personal life to show up at work, I would have been fired a long time ago. I went through an entire contested divorce and no one at my job knew I was getting a divorce at all. I have people now who were like, you got a divorce? Like I didn't know about it, right? So I had to compartmentalize in that moment, or I wouldn't have gotten to where I've gotten. What I would tell anyone now, a piece of advice I would give you is compartmentalize when you have to in a crisis situation, but do not do that in your everyday life because it all affects each other. It's all connected. How I show up at work influences how I show up at home. How I show up at home influences how I interact with my children and my friends and my family. So you really need to look at how you need to heal if you need to do that on a spectrum. Because if you compartmentalize it and you got this little piece over here and you're working on that, then by the time you get to this other piece, you're going to be like, oh my God, that all fell completely apart. And so it just doesn't work that way. Like, I think you have to do it sometimes for survival. Like I had to compartmentalize to survive. Right. But now I would say, hey, let's look at on a continuum how things are going and what you need to address first so that you can have longer term success.
Oh, I feel like that's fantastic advice because I think when you kind of become successful at compartmentalizing, it really can trickle into multiple areas, not just work, not just personal. It can kind of go into other places and really lead to avoidance. And avoidance is not the key.
Yeah, it is not. And sometimes compartmentalization really just gives you a mask, right? Yeah. Like, and then help that you could have received, you don't receive because you have a mask on and people don't know what's going on, right? And so now I am probably very open. I am actually starting a support group for survivors of narcissistic abuse. Like that is my goal. I'll have it started by the end of this year because I want people to understand like, this is a real type of abuse. People are still looking for a black eye or a bruise, but also it can really, it can really mess you up. It can really mess your brain up, right? And so if we can get people in a setting where they can share and learn from each other, all the support in the world, it matters. It really, really does matter.
That's wonderful. So I'm so happy to hear that. And I can't wait to see what comes of that. And can I just ask, would it be for survivors, not just like relationship wise, but maybe like family members or just other people in their lives that are narcissists that they've had to deal with?
Yeah, you don't just marry narcissists, right? You choose
Yeah.
them in your friendships, and sometimes you're born into families. And let me say this, if you were to do a search right now, narcissism has become a buzzword, right?
Mhm.
Like narcissism and what it means and what it truly means is different from, I think, what we see a lot on television and that kind of thing, right? So I am happy that there's all this language around it because there's so many people who interact with them on a daily basis. And that's okay because that's how they present. They present as engaging and loved by everyone and all of those things. But the damage that they can do in a more intimate setting is lifelong. And it doesn't just damage you, it damages your family systems. It can damage how you show up at work. And so I love the fact that it's being talked about. But the purpose of a support group run by a licensed clinician is that you can really move beyond this is how it's impacting to me to how this is how I healed from it.
Oh, that's wonderful. That is so wonderful.
Are you loving this episode so far? Well, the money and life level up conversations never end in the City Girl Savings community. Visit citygirlsavings.com for instant access to resources that help you budget, level up your money mindset, and so much more. And make sure you stay up to date with CGS by following us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, all at City Girl Savings.
So you have grown a lot in your career, obviously, and what has grown along right side that is your salary. So what mindset or strategies were pivotal in your professional growth from a salary perspective? Do you have any tips and tricks to share for people who are trying to grow their salaries over time?
I would say, honestly, you will never grow your salary if you're not passionate about what you're doing. And that's not just nonprofit work. That is, if you're an accountant, if you're not passionate about finances, you're never, ever going to grow your salary. So for me, my focus wasn't on salary. It wasn't on getting to a certain number. In fact, you've coached me over the years about advocating for myself from a salary perspective, right? My focus was on getting up every day and being passionate around client work. And then the salary came. So what I would tell people is figure out what you're passionate about. And it doesn't have to be what you're good at the beginning, right? Sometimes people fall into a profession and they stay in that profession because they learned how to do it and they could care less about it. Find your passion, then you will learn how to be effective at it, and then the salary will come.
Oh, I think that's such good advice because we're in this kind of place in our country where the focus is on how much can you make in the shortest amount of time. And I think so many young people who are entering the real world are just focused on making as much as possible, partially to survive, right? Because things are expensive, but also partially because that's what society tells them they need to focus on. So if they're putting their passions on the back burner, it could take them a decade to realize, oh, I've grown in this career that I truly don't enjoy or love, and I'm so unhappy. Even if I'm making all this money, it really doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Again, it goes back to kind of that social media culture and what we're seeing and what we're taught to value, right? We're taught to value things and not people. Yeah. And so as long as we continue down that vein, it's going to be kind of this push for salaries. And then what you see is like, what you see with people that have a lot of money, like, right, like monopolizing certain areas so that other people don't get opportunities to build businesses in that area because they become so obsessed with the dollar. And so I could go on and on about just how our country and our nation and that kind of thing for children. But what I will say is we really need to start talking to children about the value of our contribution to society and not what we can get out of it. And I think there'll be a noticeable shift.
Yeah. And we need that shift as soon as possible because it's rough out here.
It is rough out here. It's rough out here. You're right.
So I know you've hired and fired people throughout the course of your career. Were there ever any salary negotiation tactics or conversations that stuck out to you that seemed effective that you could share?
In either the hiring or firing process of someone?
Well, I guess the hiring process, probably not the firing, but in the hiring process.
I just really became impressed by people who can advocate connected to an issue, right? Whether it's a passion for the mission or helping people or, I don't respond real well to this is my worth, right? Like you should give me this amount of money because this is what I'm worth. for me, everyone's worth something. That's just who I am, right? And so it's hard for me to attach a number to what I see as intrinsic value of a human being, right? But when someone can say, this is what I've produced, or this is what I have the potential of producing in this area. This is how I can grow your company. This is how I can have an impact on your culture. For me, those are salary negotiations that are helpful to me to make a connection. But I've just had someone recently talk about discovering that someone made more money than them in a similar role. And that led to a whole conversation about contributions. What contributions have you made? How long have you been with this agency? Like all of those other things that are just so much greater than I should be making this amount of money because I just show up every day.
Oh, I mean, that's very profound. And I think people are taught to ask for what they're worth, right? But if you can't articulate why you're worth this amount, yes, you may be worth it, right? But how does your future employer know that?
Right. And it's just a I think, a more holistic way to look at it sometimes, right? Like I know people that I work with, domestic violence survivors, homeless people who have just as much worth as a human being as someone would say the Bill Gates of the world or those kind of people, right? And so when I come from a standpoint of like everyone intrinsically has worth, why should your worth validate an increase in salary in this setting? Then that's just a conversation, right? That's like, let's talk about how you've contributed to this situation as opposed to just, well, I'm worthy. Well, if you're just saying it's just because I'm worthy, does that mean other people aren't worthy? So those are the kind of thoughts I try to have around really meaningful conversations about salary increases.
That's a great perspective. And I think anyone listening will take heed to that. So thank you. So when it came to working towards your professional goals, did you find it hard to balance and work towards your personal and financial goals at the same time? And how did you decide what to focus on and when? Or did you just kind of focus on everything all at once? Whatever you were doing got your attention until you moved on to the next thing?
That's exactly what happened. Whatever I was doing got my attention to, it was like, okay, now I'll go to the next thing after I finish that. Kind of like we talked about, like that kind of type A, like you just want to get stuff done. Again, we'll separate my life. I'll look at my life in two phases, right? So 2 years ago, my priority was always emotion management, right? So everything I did was around making sure that there was some type of emotional stability in the household. And so that's how I determined what I would work on. And whether that was making sure there was money there or making sure things were clean or making sure other people were taken care of besides myself. The way that I would prioritize that now is really more of a holistic human perspective. I've really become connected in the world and how I show up in the world and how I can meaningfully impact the lives of other people. And so I will always prioritize helping, supporting, and nurturing over some other kind of mundane task, really. So if it's in my personal life versus work, I'm going to look at like how I can make the most impact in that time period or at any given day. Like, how can I show up to be the best possible version of myself to make the most impact? And then that's how I would say I prioritize right now.
Would you say that self-confidence plays a role in that? Because I think someone who maybe struggles with understanding their value, right? Not just articulating it, but understanding it or feeling it within themselves may find it hard to show up and help and feel like they make an impact. So what role would you say confidence plays in that?
It's so funny, the questions you're asking me, because we've just talked so much. So I am not someone that has a large amount of self-confidence. And I think I was raised to believe that self-confidence is arrogance, that they're highly aligned. And that's not true. It's not true. But when you're raised that way, that is what's in your head, right? Like that's how you're oriented. So for me, people always say I present as like a really confident person. And I think I present as a present person. Presence can appear as self-confidence, and that's really an okay thing, right? So when I'm engaged with someone, I'm listening, I'm connected, but I also have the ability to say what I agree or don't agree with. And I have the ability to advocate for what makes the most sense for me. And I think that that is self-confidence, but really what it is in my mind is its presence. Like I'm just present in the moment with what's going on and what the potential outcome could be.
So presence absolutely plays a role in that, but your ability to know what is best for you and to articulate what is and isn't working, that's confidence.
It is, but I'm not there at all. Like I will still like say to my partner, like, I'm thinking this, but does this make sense? Or does that not make sense? Right. And that's not about complex things. That's about, I want to tell someone I don't want to go to their party, but I don't want to feel guilty about that. Right. It's like those kind of simple things. And so again, just history as a child and as an adult, I don't know that I have confidence. I don't know that I always feel 100% sure in the decisions that I make. So it's just like trial and error, right?
Yeah.
Like when you make a good decision, it's great and things go great. And if you make a decision that can be perceived as negative, like how do I learn from it?
Oh, absolutely. And here's the thing, like not everybody is 100% confident in their decisions, right? But it's exactly what you said. You decide and then you take action. And whether it's a good or bad result, you learn from it or you take it and move on to the next decision you ultimately have to make.
Yeah, you just made a light bulb go off for me. Because I was raised where self-confidence is arrogance, right? But then I pick a partner who is narcissistic. So narcissists project confidence like crazy. Like they are the smartest, they are the most brilliant, they are the best communicators and all of those things, right? So then when you really start to break down what that's about, you really avoid confidence, right? Because you know the negativity that's attached to that just by definition of narcissism, right? So it's like you watch this person who presents as confident and strong and knows the right answer in every situation publicly, but then you experience him privately. And so you're like, well, I don't want to be like that, right? So then it's like this negative concept of self-confidence. And like, that's something that I'll have to think through, right? That it's not, self-confidence isn't always attached to narcissism.
Well, it's definitely not, right? Because there are a lot of confident people who are not narcissists.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but the projection of it or how it's perceived is what I mean, right? Like I only align self-confidence with narcissism, right? Because that's the most expressive part of a narcissist personality, right? But to know it's okay to be self-confident and that doesn't mean that you're expressing narcissistic tendencies is like mind-blowing to me.
Do you think you will now eventually see yourself as self-confident because you have just literally detached what it means to be?
Yes, like in that moment, right? Like in that moment. That's what I mean about like being present and to make sure I have the ability to have an awareness when I need to. And that just, I'm going to have to journal about that after we get off this Zoom conversation. That was awesome. Thank you.
Oh, well, you're welcome. But I think that presence is what builds the confidence, right? Because you're able to take in information and assess, is this right for me and the things that I believe in? And when you can have that awareness, you can just move forward confidently. So I'm happy to hear that.
That's awesome.
So shifting gears just a little bit, as a City Girl Savings client, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned about money management and how have they impacted your financial success, which might I add has been massive since I've known you?
I will tell you, and you say it all the time, it is not like to con people. The biggest thing I've learned from money management with you is budget. I swear to you, like a budget is the most impactful thing about money management. And let me say this, you can get in the mindset of what a budget means, but really what we're taught is that it means like allocating money to categories and making sure you don't go over them, right? And so there's all these ideas about what it should look like and if it should be on a paper or be an app. And like all of that became overwhelming for me for a while until what we most recently transitioned to was, here's the budget for your bills. This is your pot of money to spend. And really all I track is the amount of money that I get to spend freely, right? The rest of it, I don't even worry about, but it's still a budget, right? It's like, this amount of money goes in this bank account for your free spend, and then you spend it. And that's what I do. And that is how I budget. But without that, without those kind of guidelines to know, you talk about this multiple account method, that works for me. Once this one account is at zero, I don't have any more money. But everything else is taken care of and I don't have to worry about it. So that's my budgeting system. I think that was the most important thing I learned, particularly moving from a mindset of like, pay what comes in the mail first. Right? And then shift around the rest. But what I also learned is just to give myself grace. There are times when I overspend on my budget or I go to that account that I have set aside for my emergency fund and take money out for something that's not an emergency. And being the kind of structured personality I am, I think in the past that would have felt like a failure, right? But now it's like, you've taught me, well, look at it like, well, at least you had it to do. So then now let's just get back on track. So just giving myself grace for when I make a misstep on my budget.
I mean, I would concur with both of those. I think those are two big things that have completely transformed your finances. And I think when it comes to your spending money, right? Like we've kind of done the work to assess how much your personal bills and requirements are. And so making sure that that money is always handled first, right?
Mhm.
And then that's when we get to say, okay, what's left? Okay, whatever you want to do with it, you do with it. And I think that's a piece that a lot of people miss when it comes to budgeting. Oftentimes people just like to list out their bills and think that that's the extent of it. It's not. Like our bills are pretty set in stone. So we know how much they cost and when they come out. But if you're not mindful of how you spend the other money, the non-bill money, the kind of variable and discretionary money, you could end up deep in debt, and you need that plan. So I'm glad that that was one of your biggest epiphanies.
You just made me remember one other is that credit cards are part of your budget.
Yes.
You get your free spend money and it's like, oh, I put $174 on my credit card. No, ma'am, that comes out of your free spend money.
Yes. I mean, that was a fun lesson. Okay. So, not to put you on the spot, but when you spend with credit cards, it's so easy for the balances to get big. Fortunately, you never spent more than what you actually had to be able to pay off the credit cards. But it's such a good wake up call to realize, oh, I actually have to pay for this. Yes, it's going on my credit card, but like this money has to come out of my account so that I'm not paying exorbitant amounts of interest.
Yeah. Well, you taught me if you can't pay it off in the month you spend it, you don't use it. And now it's almost like I'm in an anti-credit card mindset. It's like, I'll be like, Rhea, why do they keep raising my balances? And you're like, because you don't spend on them. I'm like, yeah, no, like, and you know how like you spend on a credit card and then you pay it off before the end of the cycle. And I'll like spend on it and then 2 days later send the money because I'm like, I got to take it out of my free spend money so I don't.
I'm the same way. I don't necessarily wait for the full billing cycle, although it's perfectly okay to do so. I'm the same way. And I think too, like sometimes when you have an all or nothing personality, like you go all in with credit card usage and then you realize that's way too much. So you pull back all the way and don't use them at all. So I would love to hear your thoughts, especially for women who are listening who actually want to achieve their financial and their professional career goals without sacrificing their personal lives. Is there any advice you would give them to start their journey, right? They want to achieve financial success. They want to grow in their career, but they also want to have a balanced personal life. What are maybe some initial first steps they can take to move in that direction of harmony?
You know how at the beginning of every year, people say they're supposed to write out their goals for the year, right? Like that doesn't work for me because like it's like the old gym theory, right? By February, you're not going to the gym anymore. But I would say for people who are starting, write out what you intend to do now. So like, what is your goal that you're looking at now? We can always project 2, 5, 10 years down the line. But my goal when I started working with you was to stop moving money around to pay bills. And that's all I thought about, right? So like identify what your goal needs to be now, whether that's around money, whether it's in your personal life, whether it's with your friendships, and work on that. Sometimes long-term goals can be daunting because you can't see the middle to get there, right? So that's what I would say to people. I think the second thing I would tell people is if you are in an emotionally and physically safe environment, do not compartmentalize your life. Like all of the pieces come together in a meaningful way, right? Like we are not just an employee or a mother or a partner or a friend. All of those things intersect. And it's like trying to work on one without the other is like whack-a-mole, right? Like something's going to pop up every other way. So look at your life across the spectrum and say, what do I need to plan first for my personal and my professional life to intersect in a really peaceful and calm way? And I think also like mentorship. I think City Girl Savings, our relationship was mentorship. It started to mentoring me with money, but it's still mentorship, right? Like I still like engage. We still have appointments every 2 weeks, even after all these years, so I can stay on track. But it's also a way just for me to say, hey, I got a question. Like, should I start investing? Is it time? Like, how should I pay this? What should I look at? Because learning about finances particularly is a continuum. Like you will never, ever, ever know all you need to know about finances, right? And so mentorship in general, in your personal life and in your professional life and around things like finances is important.
Oh, that's great advice. So, what about you? Is there any area of life that you are focused on right now or that you actually want to put more focus on in the near future? Or are there specific goals that you're working on personally, professionally, financially? What does that look like for you?
I've just in the past year accomplished tons of my major goals I wanted to just because I was in such a better headspace. I built an enclosed patio outside and it's just a beautiful space. And I put a pool in the backyard and that's a beautiful space. And I wanted to figure out how to make where I come home to a peaceful space for me. And so I'm just continuing to work on that. I have little projects that I want to do over and over time. So like that's kind of what I'm working on in my household area. I think personally, I had this conversation with someone the other day and like, I want to be happy. As simple as that sounds, I want to be happy and I want to always choose peace. So I'm working on how do I get to a space where my life is peaceful, where there could be things that happen that can disrupt you for a little bit, but they don't completely throw you off track, right? And I just think the larger personal goal for me is really just to forgive myself, right? Like I have made a lot of choices, sometimes intentionally, but sometimes just from lack of an understanding of how to make a different choice that I am personally feeling a lot of guilt around. You know what I mean? I'm feeling a lot of guilt around how my children were impacted by my marriage, like all of those things, but I'm learning to forgive myself so that I can move forward and make different choices. And so those are and financially, I'm going to pay off my house. So I got I don't remember, maybe another year and a half and I'll pay off my first house, which has been a lifelong goal for me because I always wanted to have a space where if my children ever lost their job or just needed somewhere to go, that they would have a homestead. And so I'm so excited about being able to do that.
I'm excited for you too. I think it's going to happen sooner than the target you just quoted,
Yes.
but we'll see what happens. But I also want to just add that I am so proud of you. You have grown so much personally, professionally, financially since I've known you, and you're just such a joy to be around. So I encourage you to keep striving towards happy because, every time I'm around you, I'm happy. So you're doing something right. So keep doing it.
Thank you. Thank you. Definitely a different life. And so I feel super, super happy, getting to where we need to be.
Any final words of wisdom for women who want to be productive, but also want to be happy? I think we can have both. So any final words to share about that?
Yeah, I am always open to what the universe kind of gives me. And I always find myself in different times hearing things that I'm like, oh my God, that was so profound, right? And so there are things that I just want to share with people. And I think for people who are struggling with mental health because of finances or because of whatever, depression, anxiety, I saw this article where this guy said, depression is simply a thought loop that you can't get out of your head. And when I heard that, I was like, that broke it down in such a simplistic way because it gives you a way to attack a problem, right? So not minimizing depression at all. I mean, there are serious levels of depression that people need medication for and long-term support for. But with what I was dealing with at the time, really, it was just this constant thought loop of and how do I get out of that? And how do I change? And my first step for that was reaching out for support when I reached out to you, right? And so for people who find themselves just kind of in that daily kind of rut loop, that level of depression, if you think about it that way, how do you put your toe out of that loop the first time to get some of the support that you need? I think that was really profound for me because it helped me put a label on something that had been bothering me for a long time, right? And a different way to look at it. So again, not to minimize it. I'm a licensed clinician. I understand the severity of depression in itself, but where I needed someone to be able to point out that space for me and so that I could reach out and make significant change. And I think one last thing I'll share with you is I was watching the Harvard graduation this weekend. And I want to say her name correctly. I don't want to mispronounce it. But the speaker was Luana Jiang. It's Jiang. And I now have this written everywhere and posted everywhere all over my house and office. But she said, we as a society need to learn to sit in discomfort, listen deeply, and remain soft in hard times. Right. And so it gives me chills just to say it. But that is how I'm trying to show up. It's like, you're going to be uncomfortable at phases in your life, which is where I was, right? you're going to need to be present and really listen to people when they are talking to you, when they're speaking to you, or when you're in any situation. And then, although the world is like hardening right now and everything is going insane, you still need to be soft. There are people who need you to show up in a loving, caring, empathic way, and don't just let this outside world get to you. And so those are just two really impactful things that have just happened to me in the last month that I wanted to share with this population.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That gives everyone some things to think about, myself included. So appreciate it. So where
Thank
can
you for
listeners...
having me.
Of course. Before I let you go, where can listeners connect with you just in case they want to be deeper in your aura and presence? Is there a place they can connect with you?
So how honest do you want me to be? Like, I have social media, but I don't maintain it. So I have a LinkedIn page. It's Tiffany Tate, LCSWS. I think I have an Instagram page.
You have an Instagram, but we'll leave it at LinkedIn. I'll link to LinkedIn in the show notes because, hey, I'm a LinkedIn connection and I love seeing this stuff. So I think other people will too. So,
and I also, when I get everything really organized and start the support group, I will also have that on my LinkedIn page and I'll share that with you as well.
Oh, please. Thank you so much for being here, Tiffany, and for sharing your wisdom with us.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for letting me be the money coach in your ear today. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the City Girl Savings Podcast and you feel empowered and motivated to take the next step in the journey to your dream life. Remember, if someone like me, a millennial who loves to travel, new experiences, and iced coffees can live a life they love on a budget, you can too.